the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
Fair enough.
I mean, we'll see. We'll see what ultimately happens, but I tend to agree on the Justin Herbert front. I think it's funny. Jarrett, can you explain the new hip toss tackle ban, and how do you think defenders will adapt? And, can they actually adapt to this rule change?
I mean, sure they can, but I do think that there are certain position groups that are at a big disadvantage. If you're a nickel cornerback trying to tackle a massive tight end, or if you're a nickel cornerback trying to tackle Derrick Henry, what else are you supposed to do, man? And I know that Sam Monson is trying to preach this rugby tackle stuff, but like when you're not taught that, you're taught a very specific way throughout your entire life. You can't just turn things around and be like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll just rugby tackle. And it's comparing apples to oranges as well. But when it comes to this, it's just the NFL continuing to stack an already stacked deck against defenders. Because already, if you commit any sort of pass interference, which is already a very controversial, lots of ticky-tack calls throughout the NFL season, it's spot of the foul, first down, offense. If the offense commits pass interference, it's a 10-yard penalty. So even in similar penalties, the defense is at a discrepancy. If you sack a quarterback with all your body weight on him, it's a 15-yard penalty and a first down. If you try to make a ball or play on the ball, but you hit a defenseless receiver, it's a 15-yard penalty. And now if you tackle a guy and the lower part of your body weight comes down on a guy's legs, all of a sudden now that is a penalty. I'm all for player safety, and I get, especially, head and neck area stuff, completely fine and understandable. But I can't take the NFL seriously when they talk about player safety, when players have been begging for all 32 NFL stadiums to get natural grass instead of turf for the past however long, and the NFL just refuses to do it. But a small handful of guys get injured on the hip toss tackle. All of a sudden, that's a big priority. All of a sudden, I think it's...
And it's really just what? Tony Pollard and Mark Andrews?
Tony Pollard and Mark Andrews are the ones that come to mind.
Right? Are we missing anybody?
Mahomes last year against the Jaguars.
On the playoffs.
That was a hip drop tackle. I think, I forgot who else, but I think the NFL executive chair said that there's been like a 65% increase in hip drop tackles that resulted in 15 injuries last year, which feels like a really interesting number to kind of just like, 15 injuries, but it feels weird to kind of come up with that number.
So
I'm sorry, go Jason.
Oh, well, so what do you do? So because one of the weirder things I sent to you guys, I think in the group chat, of when you're putting out a new rule and part of the rule change is emphasizing we're not planning to call this very often, that coming out where it's because it's going to be very subjective, and it's going to be this could be game altering in some instances. Obviously we know going into it, it's never something where you want to go into a rule and know, oh, this is going to be extremely difficult for refs to officiate this fall and know when to throw this flag, because it's already going to be a little bit gray in terms of what's egregious and what's not, because it does seem like they're not going to just call it whenever it happens, because like you said, there is a lot of instances of it happening. It's just like holding, where holding is not called. You can call holding on just about every play in pass pro for somebody, and you don't. You get it when it's a little bit too egregious, the right guy sees it, whatever. It's another thing, but I do think it's funny when these rule changes come out, and I don't know if you agree, of oh, here's how, don't panic. We're not going to call it as much as you think. And you're like, okay, well then what are we doing? If you're already backtracking on don't freak out. We know this could get weird. it's not going to be that big of a deal.
I think a lot of it is going to be it won't be as many flags, but it'll be a lot of fines. Where it's similar to any other penalty where, okay, they didn't call that helmet to helmet, that was kind of ticky-tacky, but a player still got fined $10,000 for it or whatever. So I expect a lot of that to happen this coming season. But I think an unintended consequence of this is especially, like I pointed out, smaller defenders, look, that dude is so much bigger than me. I can't I can't drop the hip to tackle him. Can't hit him up top because then I'll get called for a penalty for hit to the head. I don't want to do it, but I'm gonna have to. I'm gonna aim at your knee, man. And if you get hurt, I'm sorry, but that's the only way I'm going to be able to bring your big ass down. So I think that a lot of unintended consequences are going to be, there's going to be more knee injuries around the NFL because guys don't want to get penalized or fined. So they're going to be like, look, I got to hit them low, but I can't use my body weight. So I'm going to have to, somewhat target the knee here. And I think there's going to be more injuries as a result of the rule than there were before the rule was even put in place.
So one thing also to keep in mind, the NFLPA unanimously voted against this rule. They did not want this to happen. This was the NFL and the owners agreeing on this rule. Second thing is, with the limited amount of padded practice, there's not going to be a lot of time to implement this on actual targets that actually want to hurt you. Like it's different from trying to tackle a tackle dummy or a pad because that pad isn't moving at you. That pad isn't changing the strike zone. It's going to be really difficult for guys early because there's not a lot of experience doing the new types of tackling. I think the rugby style tackles, I think it might work, but also the body styles are different from football than in rugby because, they're a lot bigger in football and they're a lot faster in football, and you're also wearing pads. Those things matter. There's a lot more space in the NFL, so I really do wonder how this is going to work initially. I'm not talking about long term, but those first 6 weeks of the season, how many hip drop tackles are actually going to be called? Because guys just don't know. You're making guys think as the play is happening, and that's how injuries happen. That's how, when you slow down, look, Isaac Newton was right about a lot of things. If you slow down and as the other thing is speeding up, you're going to end up on a highlight reel or in the injury room. So I wonder how many of these hip drop tackles are going to get called in the first 6 weeks compared to the rest of the season as players and teams get used to and adjusting to the new rule.
I wonder if they don't adjust and they see how much is getting called, where it's because you talked about how it's a unanimous there. Yeah, like that whole thing of just let's see what you're going to do, because you said you're not going to call it that often or whatever. And we'll see. We'll see if you find us. You'll see how it goes, because I think, like you said, it's just going to be too hard to readjust. And like you said, you don't want to overthink and that kind of stuff. I mean, JP, with your background on the football field, is there something, because when these kind of things happen, and we thought about targeting, it's well, you're not going to see the results for years and years down the line, because it has to, guys learn how to tackle a certain way. You're not going to be able to adjust Brian Dawkins at 36 years old. Brian Dawkins is going to be Brian Dawkins until he retires. But at the youth level, that's where you can change. That's where you can start making change in terms of how they tackle and learn to play and this, that, and the other. Has that already been happening in terms of curbing the hip drop tackle, or is there anything that you can say outside of the rugby style that's been talked about? Is there a way to legislate that out of the game at the youth level right now?
At the youth level, no, because the biggest thing at the youth level is these kids are still trying to figure out how to move their bodies, how to use their bodies in an effective way on a football field. Think about when you were 13, 14, 15, 16 in that 8th grade to high school area. You didn't know how to move your body in an athletic way, in a way that was fitting to play football. So the biggest thing is trying to get the movement skills down. And maybe, when they're multiple balls of clay athletically and in terms of body movement, maybe that'll work to try and implement the rugby style tackles, but we're still trying to get guys to tackle without leading with the head. We're at a point, especially in the college game, where we saw it last year. They're calling the targeting, but then they're reviewing it and taking it back. And this is year 2 of the targeting rule, So I wonder if we get to a point not this year, but next year, where you get to review the hip drop tackle, because it happens so fast. I don't think people understand how quickly windows and gaps close in the NFL. It's the biggest reason why, if anybody ever says they could gain 5 yards in an NFL football game, they're liars, because they have never seen how quickly those gaps can close at the NFL level and how quickly those guys can close space and make tackles. And you're really just nobody's going in with the intent of injuring anybody. But the whole intent, especially because the video going around was Logan Wilson hip dropping on Mark Andrews and Mark Andrews getting injured. That wasn't a tackle made to end. That wasn't a dirty play. That was Logan Wilson trying to stop Mark Andrews from getting a first down in a critical division game. It's going to be so difficult for guys to tackle from the side.
Yeah.
You have to try and figure that out, like without having an angle. I think with the video Sam Monson posted with the rugby tackles, those guys had an angle. It was easy to kind of square up and find the window. If you're running laterally with a guy like this, it's going to be hard to find that angle rather than like here where you can kind of meet him at the leg point, So I want to be optimistic, but I can't right now.
Interesting. But we'll see how it ultimately unfolds. But still, it's kind of wild to see the stark contrast. Everybody in the NFLPA and everything. Nope, please don't do this. And then the owners, oh, we're doing this. Great thing we got going here. JP, love it or leave it? Sneed to the Titans, sir.
So, as a Jaguars fan, leave it. But as an NFL fan and objective NFL writer, which I am, always, 100%, don't check my tweets. I love it. I love what L'Jarius Sneed brings in terms of his versatility. He played inside and outside. He shadows number one receivers. He will follow a number one receiver everywhere. It'll unlock a lot of Denard Wilson's defense. Denard Wilson comes from the Jets. He's going to bring kind of that attacking 4-3 defense. And having Chidobe Awuzie and L'Jarius Sneed and Roger McCreary is such a fun corner room. They're all versatile.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.